everyone. Welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann. You can call me H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal. You can call me Q.
You know, I just beat Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair recently.
Oh.
And that inspired me to go back to the Rayman Legends and Mark of the Ninja. And I'm just like on a whole 2D platformer binge lately. And I'll tell you, it's great.
It's old home day at the H household.
They're stone cold classics. 2D platformers. Why did we ever invent anything else? What do we need the rest of these genres for?
I gotta tell you, I can't say I disagree with you. I mean, it is in many ways a perfect genre. It feels the most still like any other genre. It feels the most like a thoughtful version of the arcade come home in many ways. And so I think I remain very attracted to it to this day. And so I love me a good platformer.
Mm. Have you played any good platformers recently?
Have I played any good platformers recently? The answer is no. I bought Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair, and I picked it up on Xbox, which I kind of regret because it seems like it would be right at home on the Switch. But of course, I went through my usual rabbit hole of watching Digital Foundry videos and seeing how much better the rendering was. And I was like, I have to get it on the platform where it looks the best. But maybe with xCloud coming in the next who knows how long, I will be able to play it with me.
And nothing like playing a precision platformer over the cloud. That's solid.
Hey, I have faith. It'll get there. Negative latency will take us there.
When it comes to Yooka-Laylee, actually, I also bought Impossible Lair on the Xbox, and I played through most of the game, and then Epic gave it away for free in the Epic Game Store as a part of their like end of 2019 free game every day giveaway. And so I, of course, kind of claimed it there as well, and then decided like, you know what, I'd rather be playing this on PC anyways. And so I played through the entire game again on the PC. So I'm like in the last probably 10th of the game on the Xbox, but all the way through on the PC.
You know, having all these choices and have a lot of them being pretty good and viable these days, PC, Switch, I really, in a way, resent them because they've just made it hard for me to sit back and focus on the real life grind that I should be focusing on, which is, of course...
Which is The Sims 4.
The Sims 4. No, I was going to say my gamer score. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, of course.
I really would love to just be... I don't know why. It's so silly when they're like, hey, you're number 3 this month. And I'm like, who the hell is playing this much video games? I feel always like I'm being defeated.
There are a couple of legitimate achievement hunters on the Canon Rents team. And I remember logging into that, achievement tracking thing on the first of the month at one point. And I saw, you are 50,000 points behind, Tony Atkins from Canon Rents. And I thought, haha, I caught a bug. Obviously it didn't refresh for this month. It was rolling over last month. It doesn't know it's the first of the month yet. It must, I must have caught it on a time between refreshes. But no, like Tony is just completely obsessed with gathering achievement points and gathered a crazy amount that I didn't even think was possible in one day in a month.
Holy cannoli. That's unbelievable. That's really crazy.
His score is really something.
Hey, quick achievement.
I'm sure he played
tip.
Avatar: The Last Airbender on Xbox 360.
Yeah, fire. Quick achievement hunter tip for anybody. I accidentally stumbled upon this one. If you had played Destiny 2 on PC, PS4, whatever, merge your accounts, log immediately in, download and log into the Xbox version, and get those Achievo pops, man. Boom, 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 boom.
Fallout 3 on PC, back when they were doing the games for Windows Live that could actually grant you Xbox achievements, you can enter the achievement flags into the dev console and just get the achievements like instantly.
I respect the efficiency of that. I really do.
Actually, I mean, to circle back to the original point, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, gives you an achievement for every 2 levels you complete. So, it's a pretty steady flow of achievements all the way through the game. It's not a bad one if you're a hunter.
All right. Good to know. Yeah. Is it one of those things where it makes me do ridiculous things to get the full 1,000 or whatever? Because I really hate it when they're like, and play 100 multiplayer matches or 10,000 multiplayer matches to get those points.
I don't think that's the case, but obviously, I guess to give some context, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair is named after the Impossible Lair, which is like the challenge that kind of looms over the entire game. It's this level that is ridiculously difficult that you can challenge at any time. And, it's basically the final boss fight in a way. It's 4 platforming sections divided by 3 boss fights. And so you can challenge it at any time, but if you go through the regular levels, then each one grants you basically another shield that allows you to absorb a hit. And so it'll make the final run at the Impossible Lair a little bit easier. But even with all 48 bees, all 48 shields you can collect throughout the game, it's still a real, balls hard challenge. So, it's not easy to get that final achievement, but it's doable, and it is the requisite for rolling credits. So it's not like it's not like some games where they make you go kind of way above and beyond.
Well, hey, I'm looking forward to it. I got to make the time, as always.
Well, we'll report back here once you get around to it. I feel like I've issued. Will
you be my 2020 accountability buddy for video games? You'll do my weekly check-in. All right, Ryan, come on. What did you get done?
How's Ring Fit coming along?
It's actually coming along pretty good.
Well, anyways, we've been talking for a long time. Let's get to some actual video game pitches. This is what people come here for. So, you're going first today. I didn't bother checking, but I'm assuming so. So, what are you bringing to the show floor today?
You're absolutely right. So, what I'm bringing today is a 2D Zelda-like game, perhaps, where you are, instead of going around an overworld to get into dungeons, instead you're kind of going around an overworld and going to different little villages of this ruined junk planet. Think of the garbage planet from WALL-E almost, or sort of a Mad Maxian version of it, where there is still space and towns and civilization, but there's also these, horrible heaps of rubbish. You kind of move around the world, go around, and instead of doing dungeons, you are going to each town and kind of facing a different type of climate challenge. And so, one town might have people that are eating or farming a lot of unsustainable foods, another one using fossil fuels, another one with no sense of trash or recycling management, and of course there's just the general cleaning up of the rest of the world to uncover your Zelda-like items and upgrades and all that stuff so that you can be better or get more tools to help all of these villages clean up their act. That's kind of the core of it, so let's take it from there, I guess.
All right, we're starting the clock. So this is a message game then.
Yeah, of course we record in advance, but this past week's episode of Doctor Who was very heavy-handed in delivering a climate message. And I was just thinking that I think it could be fun if you gave very basic tools and took the Nintendo RPG, the Earthbound or the Zelda-like approach to talking through it. Like Final Fantasy VII is a game with an environmental message, but I think it delivers it in a smart way.
Oh yeah, certainly. No, I'm not against message games. And I think that this is a worthy message to be told. I think it's something that a lot of people probably need to have a better grasp over. So I think it would be interesting if we can somehow empower people with actual foundational knowledge that they could use in the real world, that they could apply. You're not just like swinging your sword at living trash monsters. You're actually doing something, even if there are fantasy elements, something that each level at least has one kind of takeaway that you could apply to the real world to try to, kind of make a difference.
I think that would be cool. And, I started racking my brain of like, what does that look like in some ways? And I don't know if you can scavenge for parts from the like outer rubble of some parts of the map and bring them back. And like, maybe this is a civilization that has forgotten a lot of the technology or doesn't know about it, but you, the player, have embodied this character. Maybe you make your own character, you know about this stuff. But I like the idea of like helping one town set up recycling, and maybe that's like more of a logistics challenge. Big surprise, Ryan game here, right? Whether you're helping them set up a little set of conveyor belts or a centralized place to put everything, and then you're taking it through and having things recycled, or doing things where you like are teaching people about composting and growing their own food. Maybe that's an interesting angle to take, almost like the Fallout 3 sort of, you can have a farm in Fallout, or Fallout 4 rather, you can have a farm in Fallout 4. Could you do it in a way that actually has an effect on the world and like a positive impact on the people living in the town?
You know, I think that I guess as we've seen, especially as of recently, any time that kind of reasonable environmental steps are taken, there's a certain group of people that are just completely put off by just the mere mention of even doing anything to benefit people other than themselves.
Yes.
And so, it would be interesting if, you can challenge, or you can kind of travel to these different lands that each have these different vices that you're trying to uncover in any order. As you kind of bring these people to a sense of environmental responsibility, then a certain group of them, that are just the real Ebenezer Scrooge types who just like, I guess that's a bad example. He's somebody who's famous for having a change of heart coming around, but somebody who's just really kind of unshakable in their belief system that humanity can't possibly be the problem with the world. And ends up kind of moving to, the old, I'm going to move to Canada kind of scenario. And they all end up kind of moving to these new, or the other villages that haven't been, infected by this Green New Deal in a way. And so each one becomes progressively harder because there are more and more people who are really kind of dragging their feet to contribute anything to it.
That's interesting. So now you have a scenario where you're either having to sustain the population in some way or make up for the lost people.
Or just kind of a nice way of like in-universe justifying the difficulty curve. And, by the time you get to that final civilization, it's, maybe like 10% reasonable people and like 90% people who are just, well beyond their years and beyond their understanding of natural sciences.
The small collection of reasonable people, if you will. There's something to that I think is cool. It's also a little bit depressing, but I guess the game takes place in a depressing thing. I feel like it's tough to take the depressing setting and then say that the people who are kind of in this hopeless situation become more and more hopeless as you are actively trying to improve things. But I'm also interested in, what does it feel like to go around and, invent things, or maybe you can like salvage old world, quote unquote, robots and have, basic programming, not necessarily like a Baba is you sort of thing, but like a very small decision tree of like, hey, go find material X and go place it in receptacle Y, and those are things that you've kind of placed around, and it's just very, very rudimentary logistics, but you're kind of showing people, I guess the message there might be the robots will fix the world for you, and that's not necessarily the aim here either.
So there's aspects of the kind of personal action that you can take. There's the kind of like grander scale management of the entire population. I wonder if you could, because you're not directly ordering these people around like Pikmin, you have to find a way to kind of like make them believe in the message and make them take their own kind of responsibility, Inception like, you have to make it seem like it was their own idea in a way. So how down to earth do you want this to be? Do you want to have to think about, sponsoring marketing campaigns, or do you want to make it more kind of fantastical and have little Pikmin people that you can more kind of directly order around?
One of the things that's kind of interesting to me about that is the idea of, or at least trying to capture the concept of meeting someone halfway, which, I don't necessarily want to say that that's the way that you have to do these sort of things. I think that's kind of a false dichotomy in some ways, but the act of kind of going and saying, hey, I'm going to go and help you with this task or help you with this quest, and that is going to help us build a relationship or something so that we can, or you will like agree to kind of clean up your act or something like that. Does that make any sense? I'm thinking of like that fits also kind of squarely into the RPG quest-like structure of a lot of games of like, you end up on all these fetch quests and stuff, and like, how do you justify that sort of thing? And can you justify that sort of thing?
So one of the reference points you brought up earlier was Earthbound. Obviously, I really like that. I think it's a fun kind of perspective shift as you start out the game just a kid in a normal kind of American village, and then by the end of the game, you're fighting. You are contained within robot bodies and fighting this great kind of galactic evil that is crash landed on Earth. Could there be a way to kind of expand this into a realm of fantasy, or do you want to keep it mostly kind of grounded?
A lot of those sort of movies that contain a dystopia or a ruined environment also contain in-fiction myths about a promised land or a place that has not been ravaged by this and or by whatever event that happened in universe. And so maybe there's something to like uncovering that slowly. Like as you get villages to sort of clean up or change their behavior, what happens is the area around them is slowly reducing the trash and the rubble, right? So, because this is like, you start the game at a deficit, right? And maybe as trash and stuff uncovers, that is also a way, right? So other than going through attrition, what is under the trash is like a mystery in many ways. And so you might find everything from like dangerous creatures that have made home in these things all the way to treasures or to other entire lands, like lost cities and lost pieces of infrastructure that you allow you to kind of go and explore and get even more or become more powerful. But then it could also be underground cities too, right? Like a whole different piece of civilization that you didn't know about. And then that's like, you get the Castlevania surprise, here's the second half of the game sort of feeling.
Right, we're out of time. Let's go ahead and wrap that up. Come up with a name for this one.
So this is barely a pun, but EarthBurned came to mind.
Like Earthbound, I guess.
Yeah, very
that's kind of cute. That's not bad. I think it's a nice little homage to the game that inspired it. We can go with that. EarthBurned. I guess that's how somebody with this very specific accent might say the name of the original game anyways.
Yeah, EarthBurned.
All right, let's go over to my pitch today. I was watching AGDQ last week as of the time of recording. And there was a game on there I'd never seen before called Chippy. And that kind of inspired me. It's a twin stick, shoot 'em up, kind of flying around space and shooting at ships. What I wanted to do is a kind of top-down twin stick bullet hell space shooter with giant enemy fortresses. And you fly into these fortresses, and they're all kind of labyrinthine. They have weapons, and they have different parts that shoot out kind of these arrays of bullets in the typical bullet hell kind of way. But they're all like on, I guess you could say, appendages.
Yes.
As you kind of fly into these shapes, you can shoot at the appendages, and then basically kind of the higher up on a particular appendage you shoot, it can remove more of the enemy ship in a way. I don't feel like I'm describing it very well, but it's like the difference between like amputating an arm versus amputating a finger, and the arm would have guns all up and down it. So it's more of a risk to get further into this kind of labyrinthine space fortress to navigate your little ship in there like a Death Star run. But if you're able to sever a piece of this space fortress that's closer to the core, then you stand to gain more than if you were to just kind of chip away at the lower risk areas around the outside. So anyways, it's a game that kind of incentivizes riskier play for quicker wins, so it might be perfect for the speedrunning scene. But let's see what we could do with it. Let's go ahead and start the clock.
So I think, I don't know if I was at some sort of demo thing or if it was a day of the devs or what, but I think I may have seen Chippy because I remember thinking that the music was memorable. It's just kind of like a sort of chiptune-y, techno-y, not quite Geometry Wars, but in the same vein of catchiness, I feel. So
actually, just to give a shout out to that original game, Chippy was developed by Face Punch Studios, who we might know from the online survival game Rust, or more famously from Gary's Mod.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's cool. So, Chippy, you're cutting off limbs, and cutting off limbs is also like causing new, more dangerous attack patterns from the creature in question. But you're like slowly chipping away. I'm kind of looking at some gameplay now to just see what this looks like.
And again, I was just kind of watching the speed run. And again, like speed runs aren't always a great way to get a sense of how a game actually plays.
Yeah,
but I was just kind of watching the speed run muted on a second monitor while I was working. So this is just kind of loosely inspired, let's say.
Okay. So we're kind of going around and you want to have a space bullet hell, shmup twin stick thing. And, you know, I've always like, it's funny, so many of these games, right, they pull their lineage almost directly, and I could be wrong here, but from my knowledge, they pull almost directly all from the original Asteroids, right? Mm-hmm. Asteroids always, one of the things that I feel like was that a lot of these things, because they're twin stick, usually inspire is they're incredibly precise, right? And they don't have what Asteroids had, which was like even moving around in the space was kind of a threat to you, especially if you started going too fast. You could really kind of lose control because of the sort of zero gravity environment. So I wonder if motion is something that would feel fair to play with, like being able to, whether through attack patterns or the way that you kind of attack the other ships or the other creatures, maybe that's like overloading your systems or making you more powerful across the board. So the more hits you score in a row, the better your weapons get, but also the faster your engines get. And you're kind of, eventually you're going so fast, you're dealing with momentum as a challenge.
You know, or even to take it in the complete opposite direction, I mean, just kind of the vice versa in a way. The faster you're going, the more damage your guns could potentially do. So it gives you that level of control, but it also kind of increases the risk reward. You know, I was playing Rayman Legends recently, as I mentioned at the top of the show, and some of the power ups in there. There's kind of a boxing glove power up that you can get, which basically fires little boxing gloves from your body every time you press the attack button. And that one, it behaves differently if you're running than if you are standing still. And so, you know, if you are standing still, it will basically deal a point of damage to the first thing that it hits. If you're running, it'll become an like on fire boxing glove, and it will deal damage to the first thing it hits and then keep kind of going through all the way to the edge of the screen. You know, nothing's going to slow it down. So everything that it hits along the way also takes damage. So, you know, but you're also more difficult to control when you're running. You're ostensibly moving towards enemies. And so, you know, the risk is higher that way. But I do like that, you know, especially because during AGDQ, there was some really impressive bullet hell demonstrations of skill going on. And I just love to see people who have that real precise control over their ship navigate and weave through these intricate fields of bullets. And that's something that, you know, I don't necessarily want to take away from them. I want this to be a game where you can kind of like navigate these labyrinths of ever-changing bullets, and that's really cool. And so if we can kind of make riskier play more beneficial in any way, that would be great.
Okay, I think one of the things that we could do here is take the idea of power through speed, and I think we've pitched almost like a first-person shooter or something, that like the only way your gun can reload is through motion, through movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of bringing it in line with this sort of, I'm trying to think of the way to say it, but bringing it in line with the sense of momentum and the sense of like losing control at your top speed. And so I'm wondering if there's something like an afterburner. I don't know if that's even the right word, but something where you have the ability to kind of push your speed, push it in a very manual way, but then also kind of lose control over us after a certain point, like just you push it too far.
Yeah, and so, oftentimes games will have this kind of overheat mechanic that'll kind of punish you for pushing it too far. Almost like starting off a race in Mario Kart, how you can spin out if you get too ambitious with your with wanting that boost at the beginning of the race. But maybe there's no kind of upper wall. Maybe it doesn't ever directly punish you, but instead it'll make you like insanely powerful with no upward ceiling, but it just becomes like incredibly difficult to control. And so, I personally want to keep rewarding people for as far as they think they can take it, because that makes for some really interesting speed runs once people get good enough at it. But obviously, it's there would be a level that a normal human being would have difficulty pushing it past. I
like the idea of, now I'm in this environment, and let's say that it's a map and it is in a confined space, a little bit like this Clippy, is that that's what it is?
Chippy, yeah.
Chippy. And as you kind of move around, you're dodging things, but as that dodge begins to happen, you can like bring in almost racing game mechanics. So the thing that powers up your weapon is almost like getting near misses or something in a Forza game, where you're encouraged to actually get as close as you can to the bullets without actually touching them. And so now you're kind of always in that cat and mouse, like, in order to get, there's like no straight up power ups, right? There's just like dashing as fast as you can past these bullets and then capturing their momentum.
There's a game on Steam I think I'll recommend again called Super Flight. I'm sure that we've mentioned it here before, but it's a great game. It's extremely cheap all the time, but then when it goes on sale, it becomes like almost insulting not to pick it up. But it's a very good game. It's like a wingsuit type simulator where you're kind of flying through these procedurally generated canyons, and you get more points as you fly closer to these canyon walls. And it's just like so exhilarating to have, within this 3D space, this feeling of a kind of like loss of control, but at the same time behaves predictably. It's just, it doesn't have that kind of randomness element that sometimes these games do to throw you off. There's that feeling that you're taking risks into your own hand, and you're being rewarded accordingly for them. I don't know. I don't know if I was really circling around to the point other than people should just play Super Flight because it's very good.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think would be cool too is in this bullet hell. So there's a lot of bullet hells, right, where one common bullet hell trope is the laser that's like wiping up and down across the screen. So what if you did a link between worlds type of move here, and actually let the player have some articulation or control over a 3-dimensional space? And then you could actually bring in some of your dog fighting moves, like the aerial 360 or whatever, so that you can get behind an enemy. And, just a simple button push or whatever lets you do the loop-de-loop. But then you can actually start to play with the idea of depth and actually bring, I feel like, a meaningful new dimension into the traditional bullet hell, whether or not there's like parts of an enemy that contain like outer rings or whatever. And usually there's always like a little place that you can maneuver into. Well, what if you need to jump or you need to do like a loop or whatever to get inside different rings of the enemy?
All right, we're out of time. Let's stop the pitching process and come up with a name for this one. So I feel like for this type of game, a bullet hell shooter, I feel like basically anything is on the table. Thinking this is kind of based on Death Star Run. If like Star Runner would be, that feels like it must be something already. But I guess it's very close to Skywalker, which is a nice another little Star Wars nod as well.
Yeah, Star Killer also I think was originally the Luke Skywalker's name too, right?
Wasn't it the Star Killer base in what was it, The Force Awakens?
It was, which was a reference to the original intended name for Luke Skywalker, which is, yeah, he really made that whole thing less aggressive than its original pitch. But I feel like Star is such a good anchor because you have your Star Foxes and stuff in the world. Is there something that's like, because it's a bullet hell, maybe there's some play on like Hell on Wheels engines or something?
I've always wanted to call something Mullet Hell, and I don't know if this necessarily fits with it. Unless you want to make to give the main character a mullet and give it like a nice 80s rendition of the character.
I think that would be hilarious. And so like literally you can choose like the face and outfit of your pilot, but then just the color of the mullet that they have, or the length of the mullet, but it is always a mullet.
I would love if you have like a really full in-depth character creator, and then, as you're cycling through all the options, as you get to the hair, every time you try to pick another hairstyle, the mullet just keeps getting longer and longer.
That's perfect. Or I love the idea of just like any other hairstyle you pick before you hit like the progress button, it just pops an error message like must choose mullet. So it's like the developers went through the time of making all the other hairstyles.
All right, I like this. This is Mullet Hell. Okay, let's go to our community and see if they can top that. All right, let's go to a reliable pitch from the community. This comes from Matthew A. Taylor, who says, "Hey, lo, H and Q. I've been a loyal follower ever since Q went on Game Scoop, and I heard about this wonderful show.
Oh,
thanks for the content.
That's very sweet.
Here's my pitch." That's great. I like that. "I want you two to think up a game for the new Panic Playdate console. Panic is the company. As you might know, this handheld looks like a very thin Game Boy or Game Boy Color, except it has a crank on the side. Good luck." Interesting. So I remember when this first was announced, we were kind of joking that they're kind of taking the name of our show and making a console out of it. Obviously, they must have had this in the works for a long time, but and we're not accusing them of stealing anything, but it's just kind of funny that it comes full circle, and now we're here creating a game for the Playdate rather.
Yeah.
So let's put our heads together. Let's start the clock. There are no boundaries on this one, so let's think about our 2-color screen, our crank, 2 buttons, and a D-pad.
So the crank is obviously it's going to be a really important piece of this, right? It's one of the unique. I mean,
it could be like, what if you just made a game that just used the D-pad and the buttons? You just released like a Game Boy game, essentially.
You know what I always think would be a great crank game? This is not necessarily
what you always thought would be a good crank game.
What would always be
ever since you were a child.
No, so but I actually, in a way, it's funny you said that, but. Yes, I've always known this is going to be an amazing crank game.
I hear about your childhood crank games. I don't know.
I know. So I love I think the game is called Arkanoid is typically what it's called or something like that. Arkanoid, in some incarnations, in arcades and such, you will find Arkanoid with like a ball. Right? The same way that you would like a golf or pool game. There's those arcade machines that for some reason had like the spin ball as like an input method. I think moving left and right in an Arkanoid game could be really, really cool on the Playdate using the crank. It would feel very one-to-one of moving left to right, and it would actually be a pretty precise way, I feel like, of controlling exactly what pixel you're on.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of circling back in the oldest days of arcades. There were all these analog control methods, which we really don't have very much anymore. You know, there's even the analog sticks are just kind of an approximation. Maybe the closest you would get is using the analog trigger to very like precisely balance in like Death Stranding or something like that. But like in the old days, there were not only games that had these kind of analog input methods like trackballs and like knobs that you would turn and things like that. There would also be screens, vector screens, that would display just kind of like a heart rate monitor at a hospital or something like that, or a radar on a submarine, where it's not using a pixel display, and so there weren't these kind of arbitrary, even though they're becoming smaller and smaller, these arbitrary points that that your piece is moving between. It is just a continuous flow of light and darkness.
One of the things that's neat about that to me is the feeling of being able to like stop on a dime, right? Which I feel like joysticks don't. You can like course correct very quickly on a joystick and like go backwards, but you can't just like always just stop and bring it to a stop unless the physics and the numbers have been dialed, exactly perfectly all the way in. So I'm thinking to myself, like, what would it feel like to play Arkanoid? And then also maybe then like there's aspects of it where you can like incentivize the player to kind of take their hand off the crank, which is a weird phrase that now I've said and can't take back. But maybe you get like a power up that's like a gun or whatever, and the only way to actually activate or shoot it or something is to use the A and B buttons. And so you have to kind of very quickly switch between, or the up, down, left, and right is aftertouch or something on the ball. So you are keeping both hands kind of occupied. But I even love the idea of like a casual mode that's just crank only, right? Just kind of sit there, hold it, and kind of back and forth and back and forth.
So let's think of like other ideas. I think that controlling movement with the crank is, I think it's a good starting place, but like what are just like wildly creative off the wall ideas that we can do with a crank? I feel like movement is kind of like a good starting place, but like what could we do that's just completely unexpected? Like, have you had the chance to play the Playdate yet?
No, it's not out yet.
Yeah, it's been kind of circling conventions and stuff like that. So I had a chance to play it at PAX, and the game that they were showing, which was actually, I think it was the one that was created by the guy who made Katamari and Wadam recently.
Oh yes, where the like envelope opens and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and so you're playing a guy who's going on a date essentially, and he has to get to the date, and you're basically, the crank is controlling the flow of time. So as you crank it forward, time moves forward. As you crank it backward, time's moved backwards. And there are some things that are and are not affected by this flow of time. So you have to use this kind of prescripted route through the world in a way to dodge these various obstacles that are not affected by the flow of time, kind of like Braid in a way. So in that one, it's controlling not directly the movement of the character, but just kind of the progression of the timeline. So like what other kind of really weird creative things could we do with the crank?
I'm thinking about like cranks throughout history. And what if you did sort of top-down racing game, like one of the old arcade racers, but you were doing it all on like very old, like pre-Ford Model Ts or something. And so like every once in a while you had to like, A is accelerate, B is brake, up, down, left, right, steer. And then every once in a while your car dies and you have to actually just like crank it to like get juice back in the engine. Like you saw people have to do, like kind of get the whole thing started again. And so, and then you could, maybe if that's like charging your battery, it's all like small electric vehicles or something like that. As you charge the battery, like the race is like a constant balance between like how much charge am I going to put in the vehicle and how far am I going to try and go with it, because obviously like diminishing speed over time.
Yeah, I've always been interested in racing games that utilize pit stops, because I understand their necessity in real life, but they seem like just like a really boring addition to races, making people stop the races, and especially in video games when all you want to do is just drive fast. To have to pull away and then wait for a while you're watching your opponents pass you, like right. that feels like as somebody who's unfamiliar with games that kind of utilize that very realistic pit stop type of racing genre, like how would you gauge whether or not you are doing well in a race if you're watching everyone pass you? And like how can you judge whether you're making the right choice with the number of pit stops you're taking and when you're taking them versus how far you're willing to push yourself?
So that's actually a really fun idea. What if, okay, it's a racing game. It's like one of these top-down racers. Everything seems fine. And then, right, you make the races last long enough so that there has to be a pit stop. And then in one of the laps, the pit stop is like a mini game where you have you have to your crew comes in and then they have to jack the car up, and so that is cranking forward and back and forward and back, but not around in a circle. So you're going up and then back towards you, down, over and over again. That's how you get the car up. And then once you get it up enough, you see your crew kind of scuttle away. They come back with tires on, and then you're kind of cranking in one direction to put in one tire, the same direction for the second tire, and then when your car reverses, you're kind of reverse cranking. And so you're doing this kind of mad dash of like like the lug nuts and everything, changing your tires, all in this like pit stop mini game. And then of course there's like A or B button prompts throughout, so you kind of have to get the handoff and like switch, and it feels very frantic and mechanical, because like, yes, you are racing, but also whoever can get through the pit crew fastest is gonna have a leg up in time.
And just like a golfing game where you have that kind of meter that bounces up and down, and you got to kind of hit it right within the green. If you go too far, then you're going to hook your shot or something like that. Maybe if you crank too much, then the bolts are going to be too tight. If you don't crank enough, then they're going to fall off. And so, for real masters of the sport, they know exactly how much to do everything before, they could just fly through it. But for most people, you have to be really kind of slow and careful. You're not just trying to race through these. You are trying to race through them, but you're not trying to get through them super quickly. You're trying to be careful. It's not just about quickness and motion. Stick. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be thoughtful. I like that. And then I'm also like obsessed with the Playdate. I can't wait to get one. I'm a big Panic fan and all of that stuff. But like the aesthetics of it, the smallness, I think would be really cool to have something that feels like that arcade experience, but then has that weird, like a second angle, the side view, and like seeing the car jack up, and then trying to nail all the timings would be really fun. And then maybe it's not necessary to use the crank during the race, and maybe it's just otherwise a pretty straightforward racing game. But one of the things that's interesting is the Playdate is also kind of, you buy it and it's going to just kind of come with games over time, at least for the first year. And so I wonder if you could do a little like planned expansion and do the Forza Horizon. Literally every 4 months you release a new season, and that has different tracks and maybe different weather conditions and stuff, and keeps it feeling fresh over time.
We'd love to spend more time with this, but we're going to have to call that one and name it. So I presume all these little games in the Playdate have names, so I don't know if there's any kind of naming convention, but let's see what we can come up with.
So far, easy to say Pit Crew kind of on there.
Pit Crew, that's kind of nice. It has like an NES game feel to it as well, which I feel like all of these Playdate games kind of hark back to like Game Boy and these kind of classic era of games.
It's like when you could just name a game after a very simple concept, and like, of course there's going to be no other game. There's not even going to be competition for Pit Crew.
Yeah. All right. Pit Crew. That's a nice one. Let's call that one there. That came from Matthew A. Taylor. Thank you very much for writing in. That was at playwrightcast.com/pitch. You can also email us your own video game idea at playwrightcast@gmail.com or tweet us at playwrightcast.
Matthew, I hope that, by the way, you're a developer and you're actually going to make that for the Playdate, because now I really want to play it. Special thank you to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World, off the album Blue Noise. And hey, when you get a chance, go check out all the other great shows on the Cane and Rinse Podcast Network. Special thank you to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World, off the album Blue Noise. It's a super good album. Go give it a listen.
Very cool. All right. Let's take ourselves out of the show by delivering a miniature pitch. Q, this one's on you.
I'm going to pitch another Playdate game where the feature is you have to put on and take off the cover multiple times to fan out flames in your game.
All right. You were holding that on us in this last pitch here. All right. Thank you for listening, everyone. We'll catch you next week.
Bye.